This is Andy Moffat from Redemption Brewery. We're going to do a quick interview just to find out a bit more. Can you tell us first how you ended up getting into starting a brewery? Because it's only 18 months that you've been going. How did it come to happen?
Well, I guess I wanted to bring brewing back to North London since Pitfield moved away years ago. We've not really had any brewing in North London. I wanted to start my own business, and I wanted to be involved in something where we made something. And I've always had a real love of beer. And at first I thought, well, if it's such a good idea, why aren't there lots of other people in London doing it? Because if you look across the rest of the UK, there's hundreds of small microbreweries, and in places like Yorkshire, you'll get lots of them in a small concentration. But in London, we never really had anything like that. So at first I was a little bit kind of trying to find the reason why it wouldn't work. But the more I looked into it, the more I thought, well, maybe it can work, and kind of maybe Londoners can get behind a locally brewed beer.
Were you a brewer before, or how did you come? What were you doing?
No, I worked in the bank before. I kind of had my only brewing experience was some home brewing experience, so I had no commercial brewing experience whatsoever.
So how did you learn the switch between home brewing and commercial?
It's not that different. It's just a case of applying the principles, understanding the kit, and being really kind of aware of your cleaning regime and getting the cleaning of the plant right. So sometimes I look at my plant and think, from the outside it looks really dirty, but inside I know it's been cleaned the right way with the right detergents, with the right sterilants, and so that's kind of one of the big things about commercial brewing. The main difference is, I guess, just trying to achieve a certain consistency, and ensuring that you achieve that quality control. So I did a course at Sunderland University where they've got a department called Brew Lab, which runs a number of different courses in various aspects of brewing. So I did a kind of introductory 4-day course, which is about learning to start a microbrewery. And then I did another course with someone who believe it or not, is a consultant who helps people start up microbreweries. And then he also does a quality control kind of ongoing consultancy. So I got him on board as well, because I wanted that commercial brewing background and experience. Because if you've never worked in a commercial brewery, and even if you have, you might be so specialised if it's one of the big brewers, maybe you wouldn't necessarily kind of know some of the little ins and outs of doing it on a smaller scale. So I went on one of his courses and got him involved in helping me to set the brewery up in terms of offering a consulting service. And that was invaluable as well, because just doing things, it gave me the ability to do things the way that people in good breweries like Saltaire, like Acorn, like Skinner's, people like that, they're very good breweries that are doing, and I kind of got the benefit of that kind of knowledge. So that helped a lot as well. I mean, I think with small scale brewing, a lot of it is, there's kind of the art and the science aspect of it, and I think the key is trying to apply as much science as you can in terms of, try and be consistent, try and be hygienic, use the right kind of cleaning regime, use good quality materials, understand what you're using. But then the art side of things is because we don't have the same controls. So, as you saw in our fermenting room, there's no computer panels or anything like that. So we're relying on our own, doing regular measurements, and then kind of deciding when to stop the fermentation, when to cool the beer. I guess it's a little bit like kind of doing mental arithmetic and using a calculator. We're not using a calculator, we're just kind of doing it in our head. And sometimes that's quite good because it makes you think about the whole process rather than just, bagging numbers.
Do it yourself. So what have been the biggest challenges then in the 18 months you've been going so far?
I think initially I was concerned that how easy would it be to sell beer in London, because I'm not a particularly great salesperson, and you go into most pubs in London and you will see Sharps, you'll see maybe Timothy Taylor Landlord, but I think you're now starting to get a lot of smaller beers in London. So you've had Sandbrooks that do being quite a heavy force now. So that kind of quickly became evident that there was demand for it. So my initial fear was that would be a problem, but it wasn't. But I think physically the work is more taxing than maybe I thought it would have been. So there is
long
getting in
days.
early to get stuff done, And again, because we're small, and so we don't have enough casks at the moment. So that means that you're having to go out getting casks in. You're not just being able to fill one tank completely, then move on to the next one, and it just becomes less and less efficient. And it means that you're having to get one. We've started brewing, but we still got to get the conditioning tank emptied so we can clean the fermenter, and we've got to do that in 3 hours when the beer is ready to start running into the fermenter. So little things like that, kind of are the ongoing problems, which I guess small breweries face, because you have a lack of resources, if you like, and you're trying to gradually build the business up and watch your cash flow, because inevitably not everyone's going to pay you within a month or two.
No, it's strange how it's hard getting people to pay, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once they've already had the service or the product or whatever it is. What about? I know that there's obviously quite a lot of other London brews that you guys are quite closely working with. How do you guys all help each other? Is that quite a big important thing?
So the other week there, I borrowed some malt from James Brody, and a couple of months ago he borrowed some casks from me. James and I are always kind of borrowing stuff from each other, helping each other out. His pubs, he owns a couple of pubs, and they buy beer from me. Evan, I lent him some yeast the other day there.
Evan's the Colonel.
Evan down at Colonel.
Yeah.
He came up and showed us, he lent us some bottles and kind of came up and showed us how he does his bottling. So we're always stopping off at Evan's Brewery and kind of dropping malt off, picking some malt up, or doing some kind of borrowing and stealing from each other. So me, Evan and James kind of do quite a few things together.
How long have they been going roughly at the same time as you?
Yeah, I think Colonel started a few months before me. I think they were in 2009, they started brewing, late 2009.
So it's kind of like little siblings coming up together.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess because I think I might have been telling you guys this the other night there, but we're quite kind of similar in our approach to beer, but we've got different kind of focuses as well. So for Evan, it's very much bottled product. It's high strength ABVs, real kind of West Coast American style beers. Whereas for us, it's more kind of session beers, lower ABVs, but we want to get a lot more kind of flavour in there. So we kind of complement each other quite nicely. So we do the collaborations, and we do them at 6% usually. It's a bit weaker for him, a bit stronger for us, but it works quite well both in cask and in bottle. And
what about bottling? Obviously, there's quite a lot of the regulars that you've built up that are clamouring for bottles, not least of which Pete. How are you getting into that? What are you looking at? When is it coming?
Hopefully, we're just doing trials just now, because if we do it, we want to make sure we can do it reasonably well, and we'll do all the bottling in-house, because there won't be a lot of bottling, and we'll probably sell it in some small delicatessens and some restaurants, hopefully, and the brewery in time as well, I hope. But hopefully, maybe generally August is a quiet month, and I found last year anyway, it might be different this year, but I think there's a lot of Londoners go on holiday. So I'm hoping that if August is a quieter month, we might have an opportunity to be a little bit, be a bit more, have time to do some other things like bottling, for example, and just start to get a feel for it, because we want to make sure we get enough carbonation into the bottles, for example. So will we need to use priming sugars? Will we just be able to run the beer in? Will it clear quickly? Will there be too much yeast in?
All these testing and experimenting.
We just need to make sure we can get the product right.
And what about getting a license to sell direct to consumers here? Is that coming as well?
I've not started on that path yet, but it's
hoping
I'd like to do that. Yeah. Oh, if a new beer coming up, if that's of interest to you. Next beer is going to be a kind of an ESB style beer, so like probably coming around about 5.5%. It'll be a kind of a pale, hoppy.
How do you design these then? How do you go about that whole process?
That's where the art and science comes in as well. So you first of all you think, right, what ABV do you want it to be? How strong do you want the beer to be? And that'll determine how much malt you need. And then it's a case of, well, what kind of malt flavour, what colour do you want the beer to be? And so that will determine the different types of malt. So if you want like a red ale, then you maybe try use some crystals, some caras, some different blends of malts that will give a nice red hue to it. If you want like a dark, a stout or a porter, then obviously it mainly be things like your roasted malts. So
that chocolatey one that we're tasting.
Exactly. And then if you want something really pale, then it would be just pale malt, maybe crystal, maybe even a lager malt to get it really, really pale.
And how do you name them? That must be so much fun.
Yeah, that's difficult because you want a name that people are going to remember. That's going to be
Obviously with the
easy to
Tottenham
spot.
Hotspur, I think people are going to remember that.
Yeah, well, the Hotspur one was kind of because
That names itself, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, I thought I wanted to do one, and then I was a bit nervous about doing it. I thought, oh, will it sell in places like Islington? Because obviously there's not that many pubs around in Tottenham that do cask ale. It's all mainly lager. But so far it seems to be holding out okay.
What's the most popular out of all of yours?
At the moment, the pale ale is generally the best seller because that's
the one that you've
session
had longest
bitter, really.
as well.
It's the
isn't
longest, and it's a session bitter.
Mm.
The Trinity is very popular at the moment, 3%.
That's fantastic especially for the kind of weather we're
Exactly,
having.
yeah,
It's a
it's great for
fantastic kind of
summertime.
summer drink. Yeah.
So that should do well during summer, but then I imagine once we get into winter time it might slow down a bit. And then some people, just don't want to drink a 3% beer.
So when you say you've got a new beer coming along,
Yes.
is that kind of is your plan to have a lot of different beers permanently on places like the Colonel have got?
Lots
A,
of
you
beers.
never know what they're going to have, and B, there's a dozen different varieties every time you go in.
I think we'll try and hold it round about. I mean, we're going to then have a red ale for October for the autumn as well. But what we'll do is probably the porter. We might not brew that again for a good few months because I think it might go quite quiet during summer. My problem is I want to brew them all. If people like them, I know I want to brew all of them. But I think we've got one batch of porter in there just now, so we maybe brew it one more time, but I think maybe that might be us for another couple of months, and then we'll start brewing it again in maybe late October time, for example, once the weather starts to get a bit poorer and people respond more to dark beers. Because what you find is during the summer months, even the Urban Dusk went quite slow last summer. So far the porter and the Urban Dusk are holding up relatively well.
The weather's been really up and down.
Yeah.
I mean, although it was really hot the last few days, it has actually been really crappy as well in between.
So I'm hoping that if we kind of just ease back in the porter for a bit, then the ESB, because it's 5.5%, will satisfy people that want something a bit stronger. And then once we get through, the ESB will just be on for about 2 or 3 months during the summer. And then once we get into October, we'll start doing the red ale, and then we'll kind of reintroduce the porter around about late October too, probably. And then the Trinity might start to fade out once we get into the autumn, late autumn, I guess. So it's you want enough beers to give people variety, but if you have too many, sometimes you can lose your focus a little bit, and you don't brew them as well. And if they're lying around too long as well, then they will not have the same flavour. So
and I suppose you've only got 4 conditioning tanks, so there's
there's
a limit.
Yeah, so we've always got, I mean, we can get some racked out, and we can have them, and we can, most of our beers will be good for 6 weeks to 3 months, depending on how strong they are after they've been brewed. So generally we can brew one, get it in cask, let it sit there, and still, even though we could have 5 beers available at one time, but it's obviously using up a lot more casks, for example.
Yeah.
And,
so the moment you're brewing to capacity is to what you've got at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah.